Okay, so I have 11 o'clock showing on my computer. So I'm going to go ahead and start. We might have a couple more people popping in. I'll have to let them in. So bear with me as we just did. Here we go. So welcome. My name is Andi Winter. I am presenting today's talk on how to write a novel in 30 days. Yes, really. I just want to give you a brief background on me. Like, who am I? Who is this person who's telling you, how to write a novel in 30 days? And come on, what's the deal here? So brief background on me. I always wanted to write, but I didn't see myself as a writer. I had a best friend growing up in elementary school who was a writer, capital W, and I never thought that I measured up to what he was doing. And so I just dismissed the idea, let it go. And then around when I turned 30, I discovered National Novel Writing Month, which this crazy idea of writing a 50,000 word novel in a month in 30 days, and thought, why not give it a shot? Got nothing to lose. What the heck? So, I don't have any background in creative writing, what have you. My sister actually has a bachelor's degree in creative writing. Mine's in Japanese literature, which I will spare you the details on that. But I don't have a bachelor's degree. I don't have an MFA, nothing like that. This is just literally bootstrapped, life experience. So caveat emptor. So when I turned 30 and discovered NaNoWriMo, I tried it. I failed utterly. My first novel, the characters did nothing. It kind of meandered, and I thought, this isn't easy. I expected it to be easy. I read so many novels all over the place. How hard could this be? Tried it again the second year, thinking I'll base it off of, I knew Japanese literature. I knew a classical 10th century Japanese tale that was all kind of soap opera. I would set it up on a Wyoming ranch of all places, because I was in Wyoming at the time. Thought that was a brilliant idea, and then discovered it was not. All I knew about, despite living in Wyoming, was sagebrush. I didn't really understand a cowboy ranch well, so that was a complete and utter failure. But I thought the concept of taking a story I really knew and putting it in a setting that I perhaps knew might work, sort of. So the next year, I actually took Homer's The Odyssey and decided, I'll set it in space. Then I don't have to deal with historical fact. I don't have to deal with any sense of reality. I already had a story I could base things off of. So the structure was there. And in 30 days, I had a complete novel. I don't know about the quality of it, but I did it. The following year, I thought, maybe it was beginner's luck. I'll try this again. And I did, and set it in my workplace. I do work at a public library. In fact, the Wilsonville Public Library. So I thought, okay, I've set it there, and skewered some coworkers and was generally silly, and managed to write the novel in a month as well. So with that, I kind of kept doing it. And at this point, I've written 10 novels in a month, and one of which I wrote, I think 3 years ago, called Spring Comes Twice, which I then published, and it's available at most online retailers. And that one I blogged about. And in fact, the last 3 novels, I've blogged about them on my website. So if you want to go back and really look behind the curtain to get a full sense of what it's like, feel free to look at those blog posts. So what I'm trying to say is this is doable. If I can do it, you can totally do it. So with no further ado, let's get into this presentation. There we go. So how does everyone can see okay, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, great. So how to write a novel in 30 days? Yes, really. There we go. So we're going to start with how to write, and this is going to sound kind of obnoxious, but bear with me. The first thing is you need to dismiss any ideas of riches and fame and awesomeness. Just let that go. Just please. That'll just cripple you from the get-go. Next thing is you need to get something to write on or with. Now, you don't have to get fussy about it. Keep it simple, like a laptop, notebook, legal pad, phone, whatever you have at hand that you will use and that you have handy. I know people who've written literally the full novel on their phone. I know people who write literally longhand on legal pads. My sister does that, bless her heart. You know, backs of cocktail napkins, what have you, whatever you've got, use it. And the most important part is to get your hands on the keyboard. I like to talk about it in terms of butt glue. So getting your butt in the chair so that you start writing. So now that you know how to write, we're going on to how to write a novel. So let's unpack this. So what exactly is a novel? So look up an official definition of this, and we have a novel is an extended story which describes fictional characters and events, usually sequentially. So if we look at this closer, an extended story, so we're talking 40,000 plus words, so 160 pages. A story, which is a report of connected events. Fictional, i.e. not real. Characters, actors in the story. And events, which are happenings. So that sounds great, but where do you start? You start with a story idea. So these are the basics of story. So a story needs a character in a setting with a problem. So we're having a character, so that fictional made up actor, in a setting, which is a place and time, with a problem. So a situation that the character sees as bad, harmful, unwelcome, and it has to be dealt with. So what we're talking about here really is conflict. So when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about, we got to start with a want. So when we say want, it's a life or death desire. At least the character believes that's the case. As Kurt Vonnegut says, you know, every character should want something, even if it's just a glass of water. Then we're talking about an obstacle. So an obstacle is something that cannot be ignored without serious harm to yourself or to the character's self. So this is something that they cannot just ignore. They have to deal with it. They can't just go, oh, well, I really wanted this thing, but you know, maybe I don't want it that much. I'm just gonna, you know, tra-la, go off over here. This literally, they can't ignore it. They have to deal with it. So in Indiana Jones's case, we have him staring at the golden idol, considering how he's going to get it. So we have the want, for example, a golden idol. We have an obstacle. Clearly there are tricks, plans here in place. Want plus obstacle is equaling conflict. So with that as a basic idea behind everything, now we're talking about the actual story ideas. So where do you find story ideas? So, you know, just to keep in mind, you may only have part of a story idea, and that's okay. So you might get some of these story ideas or fragments from literally they just coming to you. You could have the muse speaking to you if you think of like Athena springing forth from Zeus's head. It may come from a sensory experience like a sight, a sound, a scent, taste, or touch. I believe scent is considered the most, the strongest sense that we have for memory. So you might have a scent that just brings up very vivid memories for you. You can also get ideas from just watching people. Sometimes you also need to go get actively your story ideas. One way to do that is to go for the news or the headlines. You can go for titles. There are a lot of title generators out there, where you can just say, yes, give me randomly generated titles like you're seeing here, or genre specific. So maybe you want to write a science fiction story, you want to write a romance, what have you. So titles can be very helpful. You could ask, what if? Some examples of that would be like, what if dinosaurs could be recreated from old DNA, which Jurassic Park? What if Hitler wanted to use biblical weapons to win World War II? which is the basis of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Or what if a Russian submarine commander wanted to escape to America, which gets you The Hunt for Red October? Then we have mashups, which I really enjoy mashups. Mashups are where you take two very different genres or stories and you literally mash them together. So, by all means, think outside the box. So you could go with a specific by using pop culture. So TV shows, movies, books, etc. So if you think of it like a Hollywood pitch. So for example, it's Dennis the Menace meets Game of Thrones, or it's NCIS meets Frozen. Maybe it's Outlander meets Transformers. You can also go wider by using actual genres instead of those pop titles. So if you think science fiction, Regency romance, zombies, dystopian, what have you, it's space opera meets noir detective, which could be Leviathan Wakes in the Expanse series, if you're into science fiction. It's samurai in space, which was George Lucas's description for Star Wars. It's robots meets film noir, which again is the basis of Blade Runner. You can transmogrify. So when I say transmogrify, I'm talking about you take a favorite story and you adapt it to a different genre, time, setting, species. This was like what I had done with the Odyssey and setting it in space, what I attempted to do with 10th century Japanese soap operas in a Wyoming cowboy ranch. Some work better than others, but for example, here we've got Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite novels of all time, and different transmogrifications of it, whether it's with vampires, with Twilight, which Stephanie, what's her name? I'm blanking on her name. The author talks about that was her initial sort of fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice, just with vampires. You have Bride and Prejudice, which is Pride and Prejudice set essentially in Bollywood. Bridget Jones's Diary, again, Pride and Prejudice in a modern context. So, talking about plot. So you can plot it or not, your choice. How do you know? Well, you might be a plotter if you really like spreadsheets. You also might be a plotter if, like me, you create to-do lists and then you go back and add things to your to-do list to cross it off because you'd already done it, but you forgot to put it on the list. So what is plot? So we were talking about the story idea earlier. So you have a character in a setting with a problem. So there's your story idea. You add action and resolution, and there you get plot. Very straightforward. So when we talk about action, we're talking about what the character does to overcome the obstacle. So in Indiana Jones's case, he's managed to figure out, okay, well, the idol weighs so much. If I have a little bag of sand that's about the same weight, I swap them at the same time, maybe that will work. Resolution is the outcome. So the character wants something, there's an obstacle, they've taken action of some sort, and then here's the result. In some cases, the character, they got what they wanted and, hooray, everyone's happy. Maybe the character didn't get what they wanted. And sometimes it's unknown whether that maybe the character got what they wanted and it turned out to be bad for them. Maybe the character didn't get what they wanted, but it actually turned out to be a good thing. So in Indiana Jones's case, he got the idol, but perhaps not. It wasn't in the greatest situation after that with, spoiler alert, the giant, boulder chasing him out. So we're talking about plot with, essentially, if you want to break it into very simple language, want, but, so, and then. So the hero wants something, but something else gets in their way. So the hero or heroine takes action, and then chaos ensues. So if we unpack this, there's a lot happening here. So the want. So what the hero wants is a life or death desire. It, again, doesn't mean that they want to necessarily live or die, but that they believe that they must have the want to achieve happiness, which they think they'll get if they can solve their problem. But is another word for obstacle. So something blocks the hero from getting their want. Now, the obstacle, kind of like the want, could be something tangible. So it could be like traffic, a tiger, quicksand, snowstorm, Nazis. It could be intangible. So maybe conflicting goals, conflicting promises, perhaps a character flaw. And the same goes for the want. What can work really well is if there's a tangible want. You see this in a lot of some of the really good stories where the character wants something like, they want the new job. They want the love interest, something tangible like that. Want a new car because they think that will get them happiness. At the same time, they may want something else like validation, love, justice, those intangible things. So when we talk about the wants and the obstacles, keep in mind there are some very concrete ways to do that and some very, like I said, intangible, not concrete ways. Then we get to so. So is just another word for action. So this is what the hero does to get the want anyway. Again, this could be visible action. So maybe jumping over a barrier, throwing a sandwich, grabbing a vine, diving into a cave, fighting the villain, declaring their love. Or it could be invisible. So it might be the character literally just thinking about the situation, deliberating about what they want to do about it, and then making a decision. For those of you who are familiar with Jim Butcher, who's written the series The Dresden Files, urban fantasy series, he does this a lot where he'll have a chapter and he's fighting monsters and all sorts of things. The next chapter is literally him thinking about what he learned from that experience and how he can apply that to how he's going to try to solve the mystery, what his next steps are. So literally just actually thinking about the process. And then this is the resolution. So something changes as a result of the hero's action. Does the hero get the want? Again, if so, is that a good thing? Does the hero not get the want? And if so, is that a bad thing? So put simply, does the hero achieve their goal? And where does that put them now? It's a great way to set up the hero for a new want or goal if the story is to continue. So another word to describe all of this is plot. So you got the want, but, so, and then, and basically lather, rinse, repeat. So you can keep doing this. And that, for example, if the character, the resolution is they got what they wanted and that was a good thing and they're happy with it, that could literally be the end of the story. If for a novel, generally you want to be a little longer story, back to that 40,000 plus words or so. So it may be a series of the character trying to achieve their goal, the want, taking action against an obstacle, and then it turns out badly for them and they have to change their tactics, maybe change their goal, and then they go after that goal, take action. Again, what's the resolution there? Did they get it? Did they not get it? Do they need to change how they're doing things? Hence the lather, rinse, repeat. So if we put this in the context of different genres, what does that look like? So say romance. Maybe boy wants girl, but their families object. So the boy and girl marry secretly, and then each commits suicide thinking the other is dead. That story might be vaguely familiar from Shakespeare. Young adult novel, perhaps girl wants a normal life, but she falls in love with a mysterious student. So she tries to find out more about him, and then she discovers he's a vampire. Science fiction example. A cop wants to do his job eliminating 4 robots, but he falls in love with a mysterious woman. So he tries to discover who she really is, and then finds out she's a robot. Fantasy example. A hobbit wants to destroy the ring, but others want the ring for themselves. So the hobbit takes the ring to Mordor to destroy it, and then chaos ensues. So you again have that want, obstacle, action, resolution. So want, but, so, and then. So we're talking about structure, and you can use that plot concept of the want, obstacle, action, resolution in all of these. So if we're going to build a story, you've got that character in a setting with a problem, the character doing something to solve the problem, the character succeeding or failing. And when you have that, you also have within that, top tip is to have an action reaction sequence. So a character is doing something, for example, like Indiana Jones. So he goes to get the idol, swaps the idol, and then the boulder comes crashing down. So his reaction to that, run. Okay, so then he's taking action, he's running. And then something else happens. I'm assuming we can go with the spoilers here. He manages to escape that, so the resolution there, very good. However, but he ends up in front of the bad guy and a whole bunch of people who are aiming, spears at him. So action, reaction. So looking at a 3-act structure, the classic Aristotle talks about this. So if you want to go way back in history, classic 3-act structure. So 3-act structure is where the characters make choices and they can't go back. I.e., you can't say, I want a do-over. No, you can't go back. So Act 1 is the beginning, which is roughly 25% of the story, where you establish the character, the setting, and the problem, so the conflict. In movies, they generally consider this as like the first 20 minutes of the movie, where you're getting a sense of who are these people, where are they, what's at stake. Act 2 is the middle, so roughly 50% of the story. And basically, you're making everything worse. Act 3, the end, roughly 25% of the story, and that's where the conflict gets resolved. Now, just a comment here about that Act 2, a lot of people talk about it as like the murky middle. You may have a great beginning and characters have wonderful conflict and they're, think Wizard of Oz, and they're off on the road, off in Oz, and they're going to go find the wizard. And then you have that middle. And that's where a lot of times the story can just get bogged down. And Act 2 was a great time to bring up subplots. So maybe these are like kind of minor stories within the story. So additional storylines that may enhance the main storyline, maybe having to do with secondary characters. Characters take tangents. So it's a good time to have those storylines help out if you feel like I could just tell this story in very short order to kind of bulk it up to a certain extent. But keep in mind, you don't have to fill it out and just kind of keep it bloated. By all means, the story is the important part, that main storyline. So book in a sentence. This one's a really great way to kind of have a foundation for your entire novel. So we start with, when something happens. The character pursues a goal, but can she defeat the opponent when disaster strikes? I wish I had the booming movie guy voice for this. So in here, we're talking about something happens. So a lot of times this gets described as the inciting incident. So something happens that essentially forces the character to start going after the want. If you think Star Wars, essentially the something happening is when Luke Skywalker comes back home and discovers that the stormtroopers have killed his aunt and uncle. So he has no home, there's nowhere to go. He's got to do something. So then go pursue the goal. Let's go rescue the princess. Can she defeat the opponent when disaster strikes? So again, we have the opponent. So, your villain of whatever sort, and disaster striking can be a series of things. We'll get to that in a second. The hero's journey. You might have heard of this. Some of you may be very familiar with it. The hero's journey is an archetypal, there we go, story of, the hero. Joseph Campbell talked about it in The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Christopher Vogel wrote a Hollywood screenwriter's note version of it. Essentially, you're talking about a hero starting generally someone who's a nobody, starting from nowhere, and gets drawn into a much larger world and goes through this process. Let me find my notes here, because it's a rather lengthy process. In general, you're talking about a hero who's introduced in the ordinary world. They receive the call to adventure, which, using Star Wars as an example, you have Luke in Ben Kenobi's little hut, and I think they're actually at Luke's house. Anyway, R2-D2 shows the message of Princess Leia requesting their help. So there's the call to adventure. That main character is reluctant at first, maybe refuses the call, but then is encouraged by a mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, to cross the threshold and enter the special world, where they encounter tests, allies, and enemies. And that's your middle, if you're talking about the 3-act structure, the middle there. They approach an inmost cave, cross a second threshold where they endure the ordeal all caps. They take possession of their reward, and then they are pursued on the road back to the ordinary world, which I'm assuming a lot of you can see Star Wars moving in your head here. They cross the third threshold, experience a resurrection, and are transformed by the experience. And then they return home with the elixir, a boon or treasure that benefits the ordinary world. So it's classic structure, been used. I mean, the examples I have here of The Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, The Sound of Music, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, there are tons more. This is essentially in our DNA. So you're probably very familiar with that story arc. Another way to approach this is 3 disasters and an ending. Randy Ingermanson, who wrote, actually, I believe, Novel Writing for Dummies. He's a physicist who lives up in Washington State. He's got a concept of, he talks about the snowflake method, but one of the things he also talks about is this concept of 3 disasters and an ending. So the idea of your main characters experiencing 3 different disasters as sort of major plot points to the story, and then you have an ending. So that's general structure plotting concepts. So we can go to the other side of the world, writing world, with pantsing it. So when we talk about pantsing it, we're talking about writing by the seat of our pants. So pantsing, honestly, all writing really is pantsing. If it isn't, you're probably plagiarizing. One way to know if you might be a pantser is if you really don't like rules, if you don't like to be restricted by anything, you want the freedom to go wherever, however you like, by all means. But honestly, I think most of us are really hybrids. And by that, I mean, maybe having a rough idea of your story, a rough structure, maybe you know what the ending is going to be, but you don't know how the characters get there. It can work like that. Personally, I've been a pantser. Well, I started off as a plotter. I've been a pantser, and I think I'm now getting back to being a hybrid, because I do like to I can get lost in the story and then feel like, where was I? What was the whole point of this? I don't know what's happening here, and then having to go back to, okay, what's the basic structure? What are some plot points that I can hit? So whatever works for you is what I really want to emphasize and encourage you to just try different things and see what works. I know there are some folks out there who will say, this is the only way to do it. If you don't do it this way, then obviously you're not a writer. And that's what they're really saying is whatever it is they're recommending or requiring, that's what works for them. There are some people who, I think like Stephen King, who he works off of an idea. And essentially, he's talked about with his book on writing, he talks about writing his novel Misery and how it literally came from just this idea of this super fan getting her favorite author, essentially locked up in her house. And his story process is okay, what would happen next? How would these characters kind of get themselves out of the situation? On the other hand, you have other authors who really like to, names I'm blanking at the moment, but they're in my book, and that's at the end of the story here. Other authors who like to have it, all laid out, scene by scene by scene by scene by scene. And then you have others who are just, like I said, kind of a combination of all the above. So, how to write a novel in 30 days. So we've covered how to write. So you've got your mindset of not expecting the riches and fame and awesomeness. You've got whatever you're going to use to write, and you've got your butt in the chair, hands on the keyboard, pen, pencil in hand. We've talked about having basic story concepts of story ideas. So the character in a setting with a problem, taking action and the resolution of that. We've talked about action reaction for the characters. Now this is actually getting into the nuts and bolts of, now how do you do this in a limited time? So the first thing is intention. You got to keep in mind that what is your actual intention for this challenge, and the intention is to write a first draft of a 50,000 word novel in a month. That's it. There is nothing about quality. There is nothing about spelling and formatting, anything like that. There's nothing. There's not even anything saying it has to be a complete novel in 50,000 words. I know some people, I've done this, where I had too much plot by the time I got to 50,000 words. And so I ended up writing very short summary sentences of what happened in the rest of the book. Other people who've written 40,000 words and, okay, 10,000 words was trying to kind of flesh it out, or thoughts about where it could go. So the goal is 50,000 words, which is a short novel. It's roughly 160 to 200 pages. So if you think The Great Gatsby, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Time Machine, Brave New World, The Old Man and the Sea, Animal Farm, The Notebook, these are all very short novels. That said, that doesn't make them any less than the larger novels. I mean, it can look intimidating when you've got, say, The Great Gatsby up against, I don't know, Game of Thrones or Outlander, which are in the 300,000 word realm. But it is legitimately a novel at the 50,000 words. And on a brief tangent, if you think back to the days of dime store novels and pulp fiction, at that time, a complete novel was 40,000 words. And from what I've learned of the publishing industry, you get into the 70s and the 80s, and publishers really wanted to make more money and really encouraged their writers to kind of fill out the novels to be 80,000, 90,000 words, because that seemed like a more significant weight to a book. So, which is fine, but you may have experienced in some novels where it feels like the story is coming along and it's going great, and then it kind of goes off into strange directions that don't really matter to the core of the story, and then eventually they come back, and that a lot of times that's what's happening there. But for our purposes, we're talking 50,000 words. That is a complete novel, or it can be. Keep in mind that, as Hemingway said, the first draft of anything is shit. So again, don't expect anything to be a polished novel. It's going to probably need some massaging, a little bit of rewriting, but that's okay. The intention is the first draft, 50,000 word novel. You want quantity over quality, honestly. There's a famous study about a pottery class, and they had the students in two different groups. And one group was told, you have this semester to create one pot, and it's got to be like, your best pot. So the whole time working on one pot. They had the other group, they said, your job is to create as many pots as you possibly can in the semester. And what they find is that at the end of the semester, the ones who threw the most pots who made the most of them, actually generally produced a higher quality pot than the ones who focused on that one pot the entire time. So these are just words. Words are cheap. Just get the words down. Quantity over quality. You'll want to expect the bad, because it'll happen, but delight in the good. There are so many times, I know when I was trying to fill in words, I was writing at, I don't know, 4 a.m. or something, and my eyes are closed. I'm not even looking at the screen on the keyboard, and I'm just typing away. And I'm thinking, okay, I got words in for the day, but they're probably horrible words because I wasn't even conscious and I don't remember what I wrote. And then to come back to that writing later and look at it and go, oh, I don't remember this, but actually that bit's really good. And that's funny. And I hadn't considered the story going this direction. So there will be a lot of stuff that you're not terribly pleased with. There will also be jewels in there that you will completely forget about. And you'll be like, I wrote that? That's amazing. I also highly suggest that you, from the beginning, write down the idea that got you wanting to write this thing to begin with. Sometimes we get into projects, I can talk about this with house projects, where you start off with great energy, and by the time you get in the middle of it, you're like, what was the point of this to begin with? I don't remember. And it's the same thing with novels. So if you can have somewhere, I like to put mine on a Post-it, have it right in front of my face, that, here is the story idea. And when I get lost in my story and the writing, okay, where am I? Oh, right. The point was, this was a story about a Regency romance set on a steam ship, a steampunk ship. Why am I writing about, I don't know, whales in the South Pacific? Okay. So have that idea to come back to. But one of the strongest things I can recommend, though, is to write every day. It really helps, kind of like with anything, doing something a little bit and often can make things easier for you than if you try to pile it all up into one day. I find that with house cleaning. So if you write every day, so that's one word at a time, get your butt in the chair, write in small chunks. Maybe you have 15 minutes, great. 15 minutes, get some words down. When we're talking about 50,000 words, doing the math, that is 1,667 words a day. So 1,667 words a day. If you were to do, say, write in 10-minute chunks, and in a 10-minute span, you wrote, say, 250 words, 200 chunks of those 250 words, 200 settings of that would get you a 50,000 word novel. So don't imagine, I know there have been a couple people who've managed to write 50,000 word novels in 3 days. I cannot talk to the quality, what the story was like. I cannot talk to the possible carpal tunnel that they might have had. But I highly recommend if you can, little bits and a lot of them. Scheduling. So it is also really helpful if you can figure out where and when you're going to write. Make it a priority. We're only talking a month here, so 30 days. If you can warn your family, friends, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's really important to me. Bear with me it's just a month, but I'm going to be working on this. So figure out when you're going to write, and plan for makeup days. So 50,000 words, 1,667 words a day, or 2,500 words a day if you take the weekends off. But generally you're aiming for 12,500 words a week. So however that works. When I say plan for makeup days, I'm speaking from personal experience because, life happens. Family member gets sick, you get sick. There's, we've seen in the past year and a half, 2 years or so, about, the world kind of going into absolute chaos. These can definitely, take a strain. So yeah, plan for the makeup days. Okay, back everything up. There is nothing more crushing and painful to have gotten some words in, especially if it's words for a day or longer, and to discover that they've disappeared. I had this, I think, the last 2 years ago, or no, last year, I think it was. I'd written, I don't know, a day's worth of words. I mean, it wasn't that much, but I discovered that the program I was using and putting all my words into, it just borked. And I lost those words. And I will assume they were horrible words anyway, so it's fine. But it was really painful. And especially when you have sort of a time crunch of this 30 days and you're trying to get all the words down, to lose any is just horrible. So back everything up, whether that's to the cloud, if that's putting it on a thumb drive, if that is photocopying what you've written for those people who write longhand, emailing yourself with what you've written, whatever it takes, back it up. And let's see, know what to expect. So we're talking a month here, and there's, like a lot of projects, you have a sort of consistent way of how it all kind of shakes out, kind of an emotional life cycle of it. So the first week, generally it's excitement. Everything is shiny, it's new, you have lots of energy, this is so much fun, you're totally into it, and this is just a wonderful time. You hit week 2, and that's when things start to kind of slow down. That's when you're struggling. You're starting to wonder, what did I get myself into? Why aren't my characters doing anything? This is generally when you've gotten into that murky middle I was talking about. Week 3, yeah, that's when you're starting to push through. So probably thinking, well, I've gotten this far, might as well finish this. Week 3, we talked about subplots earlier. It's a good time for those. Week 4, generally, it's a feeling of relief because the end is in sight. You know this is going to be over fairly shortly, so it's a good time to tie things up. Maybe you throw in scenes for filler if you aren't going to you don't have enough plot or story, you think, to reach the end of it. Or maybe, like earlier I said, maybe writing summary sentences for too much plot if you don't have enough time. One other comment I want to make here is about keeping the hands and the fingers moving. We talked about quantity over quality, and it's all about getting the words down. So don't fret about getting the right word. Don't fret about making sure everything is historically accurate for your historical novel, or factually accurate. I've gone off for hours in rabbit holes researching possible ways for an engine to work in space travel. Yeah, don't do that. Your time is precious. Get the words down. Keep in mind, all words are good words. So get those words down, stay loose in your body and your mind. Now, be prepared for disaster. Like I said, life happens, and not much you can do about that. You just kind of got to deal with it, like we've learned in a couple recent years here. So plan for those makeup days. Oh, talked about keeping the hand moving, which by all means do that. And distractions. Yeah. Distractions are anything and everything from the cat on your keyboard, demands from household members, happenings in the world. Oh my gosh, someone's wrong on the internet, I need to go correct them, what have you. My favorite distraction is, I shouldn't say favorite, most common distraction is, oh my God, the house isn't clean and I need to go clean it because I cannot possibly write until the house is sparkling. So my house has never been cleaner until I hit November. So distractions, do everything you can to avoid them. If you need to turn off essentially your internet browser, if you need to lock yourself in the bathroom, I know some people who've had to do this with families with small children who constantly need attention. Anything that is not writing, eating, sleeping, or bathing, see if you can just let it go for the month. And yeah, there's always the issue of wrangling your inner editor. So my inner editor says things like, why are you bothering with this? Nothing's going to come of it. This is the most, boring, pathetic story ever. How do you think you could even write? All of those sorts of charming and delightful thoughts, combined with, oh, you really should be cleaning the cat litter box, or, shouldn't you be doing laundry or something actually worthwhile? And that inner editor comes in because you're trying to do something that scares them. You're doing something that is risky. And so they're trying to protect you, which is very kind. But it's not helpful when you're trying to write a novel in a month. So tell your inner editor, thanks, I'm happy to take your input once I'm done with this novel. Give them the month off. See if you can mentally send them to Tahiti and have them on a beach with a Mai Tai. They can you'll happily have them come back and go through the novel when you're rewriting. That's great. In the meantime, have them take the time off, and just remind yourself that none of this is to be taken seriously. This is supposed to be fun. So lower the stakes, go back to that plan of, you just want to get 50,000 words down for the month, preferably in a complete story, but we're not going to get, caught up in that, and just have fun. So sometimes you get stuck. And actually, you should completely expect to get stuck. So some ways to get around this, or to get through it, you just start with writing the very worst that you can. Write the most cliched, the most hackneyed, the most stereotyped writing that you possibly can. For example, it was a dark and stormy night. The thing is with this, like I said earlier, you may be thinking, I'm writing, this is complete junk. This is horrible. I can't possibly have anyone look at this. This is just, utter nightmare of writing. The thing is, that's generally the inner editor who's hanging around and kind of looking over your shoulder, and you gave them a month off. So get the words down. Next month or later, if you ever decide to come back to the novel, you can read it over, and you will find, even when you're trying to write your worst, there will be good things in it. I guarantee you. So, scene strategies. So when you're stuck or you're short of words, throw in some plot twists. Car chases, or any sort of a chase, is really good. Explosions are good. Adding a character, like a stranger comes to town. You can kill off a character. George R.R. Martin showed us how well that works. You can also have a discovery, say a hidden character secret is revealed and changes everything. You could have a reversal. A character situation is now completely the opposite of what it had been. So someone who was rich is now poor. If they were healthy, now they're sick. Maybe they were in love and now they're heartbroken. I will say, with the car chases and explosions, when I was writing the novel about the Odyssey in space, and I think I was like 3,000 words short. And I remember sitting on the couch with my laptop, and my husband had the TV on, so don't have the TV on. Distractions are bad. And I think I was cursing, and he looked over at me and was kind of like, what's wrong? And I said, I'm just like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I just need 3,000 more words. And he looked at me and he said, have you blown anything up yet? And I looked at him, and immediately, because the setting was on a space station, I'm all, I can do this. And I got my 3,000 words blowing up a space station. So car chases, any sort of chases, explosions are a great way to change things up. And if all else fails, ninjas, because ninjas are awesome. Other ways to deal with this is to get back into character. And by that, I mean, literally put yourself into your main character's body and their mind. What is that character hoping for? What are they worrying about? What is the character currently feeling? And by that, I mean, use all the senses. What are they, I mean, obviously what they're seeing, what are they smelling? What are they tasting? What are they hearing? That one's really good, to have a character hear something perhaps just strange off camera, so to speak. Maybe there's touch involved. What are they, maybe, if you're stroking a cat, what does that feel like? So get into the character's mind of where they are, because sometimes when we get stuck, we've lost connection with what the character is trying to do and how they think and feel about the situation. So filler. Filler is for those times when you're not sure, maybe you don't know where the story's going, or you've got very limited time and you just want to get words in, and that's fine. So different ways to do some filler options would be description. So you could write passages on the scenery, talk about the weather, maybe an internal monologue, especially if the character is recapping what's been happening. A lot of times that can help remind you of where the story has been and may spark some ideas of where the story is going. Take a tangent, have the characters take a road trip, and maybe they go over here, maybe they go over there. They can, again, sort of that they wander somewhere else, but then they'll come eventually back to the story. And have fun with it. This doesn't have to be totally serious. You could write your thoughts on the work so far. This draft, it's for your eyes only. So no one will ever see it unless you decide to show it to them. So certainly you can take the time down. I will do this with stories when I get stuck of okay, so here's where we are with the story. And, Jane is caught with a virus and she's not sure what she's doing. And she's heartbroken, heartsick over the loss of Charles. Yes, this is my Pride and Prejudice in a pandemic story I'm working on right now. What happens next? It can be helpful to go just start writing down every possible thought and options for your story. And then maybe something will come out of that. Now I know where the story can go. Another thing I like to do is to write dialogue only. So this is where you literally have, say, 2 or more characters. 2 works really well. And it's just literally back and forth and back and forth and back and forth of lines of dialogue. There are no tags. So there's no she said, he said, he growled, she whimpered. There's nothing like that. It's literally quote, 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 like if you just recorded a TV show and all you heard was the dialogue. That can work. That works really well when there's conflict, especially if you have 2 characters and they, 2 ways to go at this. One, if they want the same thing, but they have different ways of getting it. It also works really well when they want opposite things and they're in a situation where they have to interact together. When you do the dialogue only, that gets the words down. It can generally generate some energy and gets the story moving. And then at a later time, maybe your next writing session, you can go back and fill in the he said, she said, the actions that are going around where they're having this conversation. Great time to add in, scenery, description of, the dining room they're in or what have you. You can borrow a scene from a TV show and work it in. And that works really well when you're sitting on the couch and your family members are sitting on the other end of the couch and they're watching TV and you weren't doing the good thing of being somewhere else and not distracted. I think I took a scene from MASH one time and just worked it into whatever novel it was I was writing. And I can't say whether or not it worked, but it got words down. And that's what we're talking about here is the words. And now we are down to the cheap tricks. So these are to be done at your own risk. I cannot necessarily recommend them for moving the story forward, but if our goal is 50,000 words in 30 days. So when you just don't have the energy or you're really horribly stuck, these are certainly options. One is to copy text from Wikipedia for a character to bore or educate the other characters with. Copy and paste. You can give a character a stutter. You could have characters ask why or rephrase questions. And this works really well when you do that dialogue only. Do not use contractions. You will not realize how many words you can gain if you go through, and especially if you're using a word processor, go in and find replace, I'll with I will, do not for don't. It's a cheap trick and immediately adds to your word count, but a little sketchy there. And then there's the final option I'm going to offer you here, which is to use really long names or epithets. So when a certain character comes on to the page and they are be introduced, or how they talk about themselves, or how other people refer to them, you give them their full epithet. And one example of this might be Lwaxana Troy, daughter of the fifth house, holder of the sacred chalice of reeks, heir to the holy rings of Beta Zed. So every time you talk about Lwaxana Troy, you've got 21 words. Easy. So thank you, Star Trek, for that. So now what? I highly recommend that you sign up for NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month at their website, nanowrimo.org. It's free. They have forums. They have local communities, including the Portland metro area. I don't know that Clackamas County has their own group yet, but you can join any group, whether local or not. And they have lots of different forums and conversations on genre for different ages of writers. Everyone is very supportive, very friendly, and again, it's easy enough to get distracted on there. I will say, though, one of my favorite things about it is they will do essentially city challenges. And one of the very popular ones is between Seattle and Portland, and it's for word count. And Seattle always wins, but when you update your word count through their website, it gets added to whatever you set as your home region. And sometimes that can be kind of encouraging to try to help with that competition. I suggest rereading a favorite book. Inspiration is a great thing. Get an idea of story, just kind of placing that in the back of your head. Similarly, rewatching a favorite movie. Anything that kind of inspires you, gets you excited about writing your own world, your own novel. And obviously start thinking about that novel. It's a really fun ride. And I do have more information, a lot more details in the book I just published called, oddly enough, How to Write a Novel in 30 Days. That is available at most online retailers. But this presentation comes from that book, and this is the core of it, really. So if you've gotten anything from this between the story ideas, want, obstacle, action, resolution, if you've gotten, hey, whatever works for you, trying different things, you've gotten the gist, the message I wanted to give to you. And honestly, this is completely doable. Story is really in your bones from the time we are small children. The stories we are told, the books we read, the movies we watch, all the TV we watch, it's in you. It's just a matter of getting that onto a page.